People filed into a Scranton church today to attend a memorial service for former Eyewitness News anchor Keith Martin. The service was held at Elm Park United Methodist Church on Linden Street. Family, friends, and colleagues remembered Martin as a dedicated journalist, soldier, brother, and friend. Martin's military service, including deployment in the Vietnam War and in later years serving as commander of the 55th Brigade of the Pennsylvania Army National Guard's 28th Infantry Division. Martin anchored Eyewitness News from 1977 to 1980 and again from 1990 to 2003. Keith Martin died in February at the age of 75.
Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am life. And those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I hold the keys of hell and death. Because I live, you shall live also. Friends, we've gathered here today to praise God and to witness to our faith as we celebrate the life of Keith Martin. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. And we ask that God might grant us grace, that in pain we might find comfort, in sorrow hope, and in death resurrection. For in dying, Christ destroyed our death. In rising, he restored our life. Christ will come again in glory. As in baptism, Keith put on Christ, so in Christ may he now be clothed with glory. Here and now, dear friends, we are all God's children. What we shall be has not yet been revealed, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. For we shall see him as he is, and those who have this hope purify themselves as even Christ is pure. This is my 47th year in pastoral ministry. And over the years, I've come to know what a huge injustice it is for any pastor to stand before you and to describe anyone's life, today Keith's life, and to tell you what he meant to you all, or describe all his attributes, because I heard about him. I must say, I do remember his TV days, having grown up in Wilkes-Barre for a good portion of my life, and then serving in churches out in Dallas and Trucksville and Harvey's Lake for much of my ministry. I remember the 72 flood and the ramifications of all of that. And I suddenly remembered this morning how old I am. I do know of his service to the country, and even more so to the great state of Pennsylvania. But you know what? Others are going to speak to that in a few moments. They'll speak a bit more intimately than I ever could. Because frankly, all of you who are gathered here today knew him in a way that only you knew him. The conversations you shared, the joys, the concerns, the times of laughing, the times of crying. No one else can know that better than you. In fact, each of your lives has been deeply touched by his life in some powerfully significant way only known by you and by the grace of God. And I know that's why you're here today. Now, I know there's been some time past since Keith's passing, since he's been called to serve in heaven, but I know also that some of the mourning has already been done, but I know how difficult still it is when we remember how difficult it is to be here today. Anytime we talk about death, we don't like it. Death has the reputation of being so final, so cold. It seems to sneak up on us, every one of us. And if it were not for the saving love of God, it would snatch us away to nothingness. But I'm here this morning to remind you that God keeps his promises. Let me give thanks and praise God for the life and the resurrection of G. Keith Martin, who this day, this very day, is breaking bread and serving God in his Father's house. God does keep his promises. Amen. So I promised that there would be others that would share more intimately about his life. And so those of you who are speaking, you could come one after the other. Please come up to the podium. I always find it safer up here because if tomatoes start to fly or anything, you can duck down.
Good morning. I'm Al Sisco, a friend of Keith's for over 65 years. I'm certain Keith is honored by this outpouring of people, of love from his family and his friends. I believe that the memories we share today of Keith touching our lives will live in our hearts forever. I want to take everybody here back to late 1950s in a little village of Hollisterville, where the Martin family, Gene and 3 sons, George, Harry, and Robert, became permanent residents at the home that had been a Madden summer home for many years. Hollisterville was already loaded with boys, so the Martin boys fit right in. Soon they got lifelong nicknames, like most of us. George was Mort. Harry was Higgins. Rob was Robert or Rob, whatever we could. Then there was Art Williams, who was Oscar, believe it or not. Richard Pantoski, Rick. Frank Schillo, he was Frankie. Tommy Janoski was Tommy Boy. And me, I was Butch. Yes, Keith is the only friend I've ever had with 3 aliases: George, Keith, and Mort. As the years passed, we even nicknamed our group the Old Gang. To us, he was, and he always will be Mort. We spent our days playing baseball in the old tennis court behind Art's house, basketball at our famous community hall with minstrels and all kinds of family get-togethers, football in the Martins field, and swam each summer in the old swimming hole down at the Hollisterville Creek. Only years later did we ever realize how blessed we were. Oh, good memories. I shouldn't do this. To grow up in a safe and loving village. We finished our 8th grade Hamlin Elementary School, where we graduated class with less than 20 people in an elementary school, unheard of in today's world. Today, our school district, that year, our school district granted us paid tuition to go to a high school of our choice, because our choice was an ag school. Transportation was not part of the deal, but 2 people raised their hand, Keith and myself. And we would then hitch a ride with any neighbor going to Scranton. We'd hitchhike 25 miles every day in all kinds of weather to and from school. During most of the walks, we had great times talking about our future and, of course, all the new girls we met. This was certainly a growing experience for both of us. After that year, the school district provided transportation for everybody in the area that wanted to attend the Scranton schools. And we truly appreciated a ride on this bus door to door instead of hitchhiking and walking. As a teenager, Mort worked many unusual jobs. I want to share some. Many members of the old gang were working right alongside of him. May's Poultry Service was one such job. Our trucks would go to upstate New York and go in coops of thousands of chickens and debeak leghorn chickens. You couldn't see the person standing next to you, and then transport them to egg-producing facilities. Sometimes our work shift would last 2 full days, sleeping in the truck or on tarps alongside of the road. Another job led an 8-man crew at the mushroom farms, filling windowless concrete, huge coops with tons of ground horse manure, straw, and corn cobs. A tough, smelly, dirty job, but it paid big bucks. We actually made more than $1 an hour while we did that work. In yet another job, Mort drove his old Nash Rambler before daybreak to Buck Hill Falls with a carload of us to be caddies at the old country club, all the old gang. I recall the infamous 2-mile downhill glide, as Higgins just reminded me, that was to save gas. We would put the car, we got on a huge hill, we'd put the car in neutral and let it glide for over 2.5 miles at high speed down this hill. Our goal was, the challenge was to get it to make it all the way to the entrance into Buck Hill. A heck of a way to start the day, and Keith was right behind the wheel. Mort grew up always ready for a challenge. He learned to fear nothing, understood that practice made perfection, and at the same time he'd laugh at his mistakes with his, you remember the old, oh gosh, when things would go wrong. He was fun to be around and would befriend any person, anybody. As our education and our careers and family grew, we ended up all over the United States and abroad. The old gang had trouble staying in touch. So in 1989, Art, AKA Oscar, took the initiative to start an old gang reunion. Members would rotate housing the party, and until COVID, we never missed a year. Keith always treasured the friendships and memories of our youth. He would travel any distance to spend the day reminiscing, arrive early, and stay over some nights, never missing a reunion in 30 years. We will all miss him, his energy, his smile, his friendship. And he'll always remain right here. Thank you. Sorry.
Good morning. My name is Mark Hiller. I'm a television news anchor and reporter for WBRE TV and WYOU TV. Growing up a New York Mets fan, is what I am, my boyhood idol was a baseball pitcher named Tom Seaver, an athlete nicknamed Tom Terrific, who was respected for his talent and leadership both on and off the field during his Hall of Fame career. It was only several years into his career that I learned his first name wasn't Tom after all. Thomas was his middle name. His first name was actually George. Fast forward, after Seaver's pitching days were done, I worked with a broadcast journalist who I would also idolize, whose first name was also George, but was known in the eyewitness newsroom and on air and by many of us here by his middle name, Keith. The great Keith Martin, who we honor and remember here today. Keith had 2 tours of duty with Eyewitness News from 1977 to 1980, and again from 1990 to 2003. Now, while some here may have worked with Keith during that first tour, many of us who are still in the Eyewitness newsroom only got to know him that second time around when he came home. But there was a breaking in period for us all. Getting to know Keith is certainly memorable. Like the time he was about to cover a story out of the building and in the field, as we news people say. Cell phones weren't a thing back then, and our common means of communication were devices called two-ways, which allowed the reporter and the newsroom to communicate with each other behind the scenes. Keith was in the field anchor reporting and relaying information before his report and speaking in a language, to be quite frank, many of us didn't understand. So indulge me a moment. I'm going to take liberties a little bit to create a scenario of what that was like. It went something like this. Car 1 to the newsroom. This is Keith. I've got the name of the avenue I'm on. It's Kaiser. That's Kilo, Echo, Yankee, Sierra, Echo, Romeo. You got it? Keith's producer, Jane Ann Bugda, who remains the senior producer to this day at Eyewitness News, paused, trying to make sense out of what she just heard. What else could she say but, yes, we got it. What we all actually got was a crash course on that NATO phonetic alphabet, which Keith no doubt used countless times during his military service. Then there was the time Jane Ann was encouraged by a news director at the time to speak into anchors' earpieces on occasion, including Keith's during a newscast, and pick a moment to tell them, you're doing a good job. That it would be encouraging.
The moment came with Keith anchoring and Jane Ann producing, saying in his earpiece, "You're doing a good job." Keith promptly skipped the next story and went straight to the commercial break. When Jane Ann asked Keith afterwards why he did that, Keith said, "You told me to drop the story, didn't you?" She said, no, that she was just telling him he was doing a good job, that she was encouraging him on the advice of our news director. Keith replied, "That rule stops tonight." Keith never really did need encouragement from any of us, but did he ever encourage us in the newsroom, both by words and example? He was known for his election day rah-rah speeches. He used to call our reporter Andy Michalczyk by the nickname Bulldog, complimenting and encouraging Andy's aggressive reporting long before Andy became the Eyewitness News lead I-team reporter. Keith would show up to work without fail. Many of us would see him in his military uniform. He'd balance that ongoing military commitment with the Pennsylvania National Guard and his duties as a journalist in our newsroom. He considered it a great honor to be a journalist and helped us understand that it's more important to get the information right than to hastily try to be first on air. When things behind the scenes did not always go right, he did not lose his cool. That Keith Martin was one cool customer. A mutual colleague of ours who's here today, Kathy Basinski, upon Keith's passing wrote so eloquently, referring to Keith, "He was brilliant, professional, and smooth as silk on air. Off air, he was hysterically funny and fun-loving, with just a touch of the devil. He cared about people. He cared about those who turned to him for their news." Keith's always instilled in me and so many others to take the job seriously, but not yourself too seriously. He was not afraid to tell that occasional corny joke during lighter moments of the newscast. And something he said many times on air at WBRE 28, which I borrowed on occasion, "Love that 28," when the number 28 was one of the lottery numbers drawn that night in the Pennsylvania lottery. Keith was a good, make that great, recruiter of various causes, whether it was encouraging coworkers to support the United Way or donate time to fundraisers, including one which I have to reference here. It's billed as an annual celebrity brunch to benefit the Deutsch Institute, a Scranton-based nonprofit which provides recreational and social activities for people with various mental and physical challenges. The year, and I'm guessing here, was probably around 1995 when Keith asked me to consider helping out the cause on what was a day off. How do you say no to Keith when you know that he does so many things? So of course I said yes. And because of what he instilled in me, that sense of service, it's a charity to which I still support this very day. Did he ever embody the ancient adage, "With great power comes great responsibility"? And there are so many more stories to tell, but I do have to make room here for others. But I think of Keith, I think of the skit we did at a holiday Christmas party as the Blues Brothers. Keith was Joliet Jake, for the record. And I also think of when my son was about to serve our country post 9/11, and a concerned father needed a little bit of counsel and compassion from someone who'd get it. I reached out to Keith. I was told he was in Texas, that he'd probably get back to me. I wasn't counting on it. Within a couple of minutes, I'd say, Keith called, and for roughly an hour, spent time on the phone, giving this concerned dad just the right words he needed to send his son off into a troubled world. When we received the terribly sad news that Keith's time on God's earth had passed, our newsroom knew we had to pay a worthy tribute, which my colleague Andy Michalczyk so fittingly did with a pair of reports. If you haven't seen them, look them up online. The day of those reports happened to be a day off for me, and Andy asked if I cared to say anything, contribute to the report, and of course I did. Andy tried to make it easy for me, and allow me to meet a videographer near my home and share my thoughts on camera that way and record them. We'll put it into the piece. It's what I intended to do. But then I paused and I thought, what would Keith do? I got in my car and I made the trip to Wilkes-Barre because that's exactly what Keith would have done. We lost a giant in February, a journalist, a man's man, a servant of country and community, and for us gathered here today, a real friend. I can promise you this: as long as any of us who ever worked with Keith are still breathing air, Keith will never really be gone. His legacy and his inspiration, his DNA, is still in that newsroom. And I have the great honor of occupying Keith's chair a couple of times a week to deliver the news from the anchor desk. Keith's legacy and his inspiration will live on forever. A one-of-a-kind, a man who commanded respect, a friend who was much loved and will never be forgotten. Hail and farewell to the great George Keith Martin. Thank you.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Gerry Burns. I was Keith's Chief of Staff, Executive Officer. I know who Keith Martin was, a TV anchor, from watching the news. My first contact with him was at the Department of Military Affairs in Harrisburg. I was the recruiting area commander for Philadelphia, and he was a state marksmanship coordinator. We'd usually exchange small talk in the hallways or in the break room. Our first real interaction was in 1993 through 1997, when he was the battalion commander of the 3rd 109th Infantry and the 3rd 103rd Armor in Lewisburg, and I at that time was the recruiting commander for Central Pennsylvania. We would meet monthly before his staff meetings, discuss ways to support each other in our recruiting efforts. He was always totally professional. When he was selected as commander of the 55th Brigade in Scranton in 1998, he selected me as his executive officer and the administrative officer of the full-time support force, a journey we would share for the next 3 to 3.5 years. He was only the brigade commander for a few months, and the Lake Erie tornado struck. On June 2nd, 1998, at 10:30 p.m., I received a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning from a gentleman. Said he was with PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and we are to activate 100 soldiers within a few hours. Well, I can't say we're in a house of worship, what I said to the gentleman, because I thought it was one of my friends, some of them are here today, that were pulling my chain. I got a new promotion and a new position. And after the gentleman reminded me again that he was so-and-so from the Pennsylvania Management Agency, I said, yes, sir. My first phone call, the commander, Keith Martin. I told him what had happened, and he asked me, Jerry, what's your recommendation? I said, well, we should send 50 soldiers from West Pittston and 50 from New Milford. They were the closest units. He said, absolutely, let's do it. I made the proper phone calls to the people in charge. I packed a bag. I headed for Tunkhannock to the Emergency Operations Center. I wasn't there a half hour. And who comes walking through the door in uniform? Yeah, Colonel Keith Martin. He was in charge. We met with the county commissioners, the state police, and we developed a plan for assistance. We initially searched for survivors. Then we transitioned to security in conjunction with the state police. When we left Lake Cary 3 weeks later, on the direction of Major Mike Jones, the residents of Wyoming County appreciated the hard work of our citizen soldiers. Keith always talked to me. He always talked how fortunate we were to have such an excellent staff. Our full-time staff, our part-time staff. Everybody. A brigade is about 2,500, 3,000 people. A battalion is about 800. A company's 125. And under his direction, everybody was on the same sheet of music, all working together. And he also had some great battalion commanders. He always wanted the 55th Brigade to lead the way in the 28th Infantry Division. Many nights at our annual trainings at Fort Pickett, Virginia, after a hard day's training, we'd sit together and he'd have his peroty cigar and we'd discuss what went right, what went wrong, what's the plan for tomorrow. Many of you don't know, but military ammunition comes in cans. And an M16 rifle, there's a can that holds 1,000 rounds. Keith had an extra one. And it held about 100 to 150 peroties. He always had the ammo can with peroties. Because I used to bust about the time. I said, you know, we talk about our time in Vietnam. I was there, he was there a little before me. And we talk about the good, the bad. And after at Fort Pickett in the middle of the night, I'd say, you know, thank God there's no enemy here. They know where we were from 2 miles away with that peroty cigar. He was just an unbelievable human being. Colonel Martin led by example all the time. He set high standards, and he expected his soldiers to carry them out. But, above all, it was the team concept. It was never about one individual, it was about the team. And if we didn't perform to standard, he would say, let's learn from it. There's no such thing as failure. Failure is not trying. He always encouraged input from his staff and his subordinates as well. Everyone, from the primary staff to majors, to all the NCOs to sergeants, he wanted anybody to offer their input. The military often use what they call AARs, after action reviews. What went right, what went wrong, and again, how can we correct it? One example of his inclusion of everyone, at one of our training exercises at Fort Indiantown Gap, we were doing our AAR, and he'd go right down the line, all the majors, the S1, the personnel, S2, intelligence, S3, operations and training, S4, logistics, and our signal officer, their input, good and bad, and then he'd ask all the sergeants, anybody. All of a sudden, one young private in the back of the room raises his hand, and of course all of us in the staff are looking around, and where did this come from? The private raises his hand and said, sir, I just returned from basic training, and what you were just discussing, they changed the name of it. Well, Colonel Martin looks around the room, smiles. He couldn't do enough to thank the soldier. He said, "Thank you, I really appreciate it." Of course, then he turned around, he said to the staff, "Check it out, and if that's true, implement it immediately." He was always proactive. One of his first big decisions as the brigade commander was, "We are bringing back the Armed Forces Parade to Scranton." I didn't need that. Brand new job, brand new promotion, and this guy wants to bring a parade back to Scranton. He said he made a promise to his mother, Jean Madden Martin. He remembered seeing the soldiers march in the past parades, and his mother would tell him to stand up straight when the soldiers and the flag came by. We got all of our retirees involved. We got the city's Scranton administration, Jim Wintermell's here, the Scranton police. We held monthly meetings. We contacted every high school band in the area. His orders: we march whether there's 20 people present, 200 people present, or 2,000 people present. We are marching for all the past servicemen and women, those presently serving, and those who will serve in the future. After we both retired in the 2001 timeframe, my wife Jean and I spent some time with Keith and Kay. We were very fortunate. We went down to Myrtle Beach many times. They lived on the Litchfield golf course. We'd play golf. We did have a couple cocktails at the end on his sun porch. And Keith, again, like everybody said, he'd start with his stories. Of course, my wife and Kay would roll their eyes, look at each other and say, "This is probably the 10th or 12th time we heard this." Do you think Keith cared? Not a chance. The 10th time he told it was funnier than the first, and we'd all laugh. We even went to Cape Cod, spent some time with him and Kay up in Brewster. At one time I told him, "Keith, my grandmother was a Madden." He quickly said, "Whatever you do, don't do Ancestry.com. We might be related." He was a proud soldier, a friend, but above all, a great American who loved putting on the uniform and serving his country. Yes, we lost another great soldier, one who cared about every soldier that he served with. And in closing, Colonel Martin, your mission is accomplished. Job well done. Rest in peace. Thank you.
I'm Harry. Keith's my older brother by 3 years. Our family is very grateful for everyone gathering with us this morning to celebrate Keith's life. Thank you. And a special thank you to the United States Army and to the active service members and veterans who honor us today, who volunteered to help give him military honors. You know, those of us who've lived a long life, you look back over your life and you think about the memories and moments in your life that meant more to you than you realized at the time. You think about choices you made, good and bad, and ask yourself, have I lived a good life? But most of all, you think about the people in your life who have meant the most to you. And Keith is one whose life meant a great deal to his brothers, to his family, and to many people whose lives he touched. Keith was special. This morning you've heard some great Keith stories and some special bonds. I want to share more about the roots of his journey that run very deep here in Scranton and northeastern Pennsylvania, and to share with you what I think his legacy means, what it means for me. We all know Keith was a character full of life, great sense of humor, outgoing like our mother. Keith could meet a stranger and have a conversation, and by the end have you think that they knew each other for their entire lives. Among his many gifts, he had a unique ability to connect and get along with people from all walks of life. That's a gift. We also all know that the content of Keith's character was that of a leader. His long service to our country, dedication to duty, and his readiness to stand in harm's way show him as one of America's warriors willing to sacrifice like others who are with us here this morning. That's a calling. What you may not know is that Keith started from very modest beginnings, as Al shared, in Hollisterville and here in Scranton. But he took the road less traveled, and he created a very rich legacy and life that we all know today. The roots began on the beaches of Cape Cod, where Martins have gathered for over a century to play. We would gather with our parents and aunts and uncles and cousins and made wonderful memories and family traditions. And now that's where he wants his remains to rest. Here in Scranton, where our mother's family made their home from the early 1900s, where our mother raised us to live with integrity, honesty, and loyalty, to treat people from all walks of life equally, respect our elders and care for the elderly, love family and country. It's here at Old Central High. Keith learned to pursue excellence in everything he did, and he learned to live generously here at Elm Park Church, where we worshiped. We lived in the old Hotel Holland on Adams Avenue, just a couple of blocks from Elm Park. When the hotel closed, as Al has shared, we moved out to Hollisterville. But it's amazing what the value of a little town with 3 churches, a feed store, a community hall, and some of God's salt of the earth people can do to create wonderful people. World War II vets raised their families there and were great role models for hard work and duty. There are the memories that Al shared that we created as the old gang and have become lifelong friendships. Keith's love for jazz and playing the drums, classic comedy movies, the Brooklyn, now LA Dodgers, and Green Bay Packers. Dreams of college and joining the Army all started in Hollisterville. The community hall was where Keith played basketball, as Al mentioned, but there were something that the adults of that community did in that community hall where we'd have all kinds of social gatherings and minstrels, old-fashioned minstrels. And one of the pictures in the video that you see is a picture of Al, Art, Oscar, and George singing the sister song that Rosemary Clooney made famous. And to see those 3 guys in Get Up, just the silly skit created butt-gusting laughter. As teens, we all did hard work, dirty work, as Al also pointed out. But it's there where family, faith, community, and hard work all fused together into the positive values and the moral compass that set the course for the rest of his life. He also learned how to have fun all on his own. We all know what a character he could be. One funny story, it wasn't funny at the time to him because he was in pain, but we all, being old gang guys, we'd rib him about stuff like this. At college, where he was majoring in the art of just barely staying in college with a well-earned C average, on the occasion of a graded test papers being returned in a math class, Keith shows up following a long night out on the town, not feeling very well. Sits down while the professor hands out the test booklets commenting on the class's performance. Upon coming to a blurry-eyed, half-awake Keith Martin, the professor looks down, shaking his head, and says, "And then there are some of us who are mathematically anesthetized." I don't think he got an A that day. But he's no quitter. What he lacked in math, he made more than made up for in perseverance. It was also at Lafayette where he laid the foundation for successful 3.5-decade-long careers in both the military and news. An Army ROTC scholarship covered some of the tuition, but obligated him to a tour of duty in Vietnam. He shoveled coal in a local hotel at night, and he worked nights and weekends for a small Easton radio station where he learned the news business from the ground up. It is there where he became so good with words, and to see the news in events and people. It's then, watching the great anchors like Cronkite and Chancellor, Keith learned the craft of ethical and trustworthy journalism. After Lafayette, he went off to war, mercifully came back in one piece, smoking those Perotti cigars. Quick story, the only reason he smoked them is because our mother sent them to him because all the troops in his group were suffering from all the jungle bugs, that she sent them Perottis hoping that they would keep the bugs away so they could concentrate on their mission and come home alive. So that's how he started smoking Perotti cigars. He never explained why he kept smoking them for the rest of his life. And so we brought Keith home, here to this place where his life journey began. And now, at the end of his journey, in the embrace of his friends and family who he loved so well, to say goodbye. It's never easy to say goodbye. Too often there are things left unsaid too long until too late. We talked once he moved up to Cape Cod, we'd have the opportunity and time to talk about old times, family, and some mileposts in his life, like these. He served in and survived a war many didn't like. Who of us knew he survived a helicopter crash after the helicopter's engine was hit by ground fire? I've often wondered what else he and his brothers faced. In the early days following 9/11, Keith was Pennsylvania's Director of Homeland Security. The job was brand new to America, and it was very hard. We all expected so much from the new Homeland Protectors. I've often wondered what threats he helped thwart to protect us. But now, opportunities missed are opportunities lost. And yet, we have the opportunity to share his legacy because we knew and loved him. For me, Keith's legacy is a good life, lived well, blessed with gifts and a calling, lived with courage and optimism, a life dedicated to duty and service, a newsman you could trust to report real news, a soldier who knew war but dedicated his life to peace, a man who gave his all and gave back to his community all through his life. He was a loyal friend and mentor, a person who loved his family and everyone in it. A big brother to his brothers and to anyone who needed a big brother. Keith's legacy lives on in his stepsons, Doug and Bart, who raised their beautiful families while they too shoulder senior leadership responsibilities. Keith's legacy lives on in all our children who loved his stories, Cape Cod lobster bashes, and favorite games of Keith's wife Kay, Parcheesi, and cutthroat croquet, a special version Doug and Bart invented with a flair for good-natured rivalry. They all carry on his philosophy: work hard, serve, and give back. Keith's legacy lives on in his brothers. All through our lives, we've shared our big brother's dedication to duty and love of country. He had some great patriotic sayings. This one on patriotic duty stuck with me so much I quoted him in a book I wrote. He said, "To be strong, America has never needed everyone to serve in the same way. It does need everyone to serve in some way." For me, that captures the American way as succinctly as words can say. Though he will be missed very much, I know his brothers' lives, all our lives, are better for him to have been in our lives. The journey with him has been fun, a lot of great memories to celebrate. For me, he was taken too soon, but I know from the things he said to me this past year, he faced crossing the bar with grace and great courage. And though I wasn't ready to hear the angels calling him home, his heart knew it was time. And now Keith is reunited with his beloved Kay. May your spirits live on in each of us. May God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thanks for being a great friend to us all. And thanks for being a great big brother.
I'm sure nobody here knows who I am, but it's Buck Buchanan. I was a classmate of Keith's at Lafayette College, class of '68. If you're someone here from Lafayette in those days, I'm sure I don't recognize you, but Keith and I were both in ROTC together. We had those 4 years of all the trials and tribulations of learning to be officers. And the Army has a little game they play very late in our senior year. You're asked to decide what branch of the Army you want to be in. And we had a class of maybe 45 or 50 ROTC cadets. And out of that group, there were only 2 people that asked to be in the combat arms. You had infantry, armor, and artillery. Keith was the only one that asked to be infantry. I asked to be armor because it was the route to become a helicopter pilot. A lot of our other classmates were saying, "What are you guys doing? It's 1968. Do you know where you're going to go when you get through your school?" And I asked Keith, one time, I said, "Keith, how do we answer that?" Keith's answer, it's a pretty simple answer. Somebody's got to do it, so why not us? That was his mindset. So we graduated, got our commissions, and Keith and I said goodbye. I didn't know if I'd see him again or not. Fortunately, obviously, we both survived Vietnam. I came back and started flying with the Pennsylvania National Guard, and one particular day I was leading a flight and we stopped at the Hazleton Airport. They had really good hamburgers there, so it was a frequent stop for us. One of the other pilots came up just as we were about to take off or start cranking the helicopters up, and he said, "You won't believe what this guy over here is doing. He's going to jump out of an airplane." Well, we did a lot of that with our Pathfinders and the PA Guard. He said, "Well, he's never done it before." Okay, there's always got to be a first. "Yeah, but he's going to do it live on camera." I said, "What?" "Yeah, this guy's never done it, but he's going to be live on a TV camera when he does it." I said, "Man, that's crazy." He said, "Yeah, his name's Martin." Now, I knew him as George Martin back in the 60s. I thought, what are the odds? I thought for a second, those odds are pretty good. That probably is Keith. And it was. So I got to see him that time. And, that's the kind of guy he was. I need to say that to you. Years later, of course, he joined the PA Guard, and I'd see him lots of times down at Fort Indian Town Gap at the club. We'd have a few beers together, but he never got me to smoke those cigars. So we thought we were done, and as I came to my time in the Guard and was going to retire, the Adjutant General called me in. He said, I ran the selective service for the appeal boards. He said, "That's a pretty tough job. We're having a problem to decide who could do that, but do you think Keith Martin could do it?" I said, "Oh, Keith Martin, certainly." So I had the honor of turning over my command to Keith Martin, and again we said goodbye. Thought that was the end of our times together. And after 9/11, I, as a police commissioner, was going to attend one of those briefings about security and so forth. Chief and I walk into a building, maybe 35, 40 people there, and from the other side of the room, this booming voice comes out, "Buck!" Knew immediately it was Keith. All right, so here's another job that Keith took on. Somebody needed to do it, and Keith was that kind of a guy that would step up and do it. So I just wanted to say those few words to you. To his family, I want you to understand that Keith had a tremendous passion to serve, and he had the courage to take on those jobs, to be an infantryman, to volunteer for something that needed to be done. You probably know that as much as I do. And he had character. Now don't mishear me here. I know he was a character, but he had character. The character that most people in a very short time would get to know and understand that there's a man that really has his act together. So for his family, there's a good many people that you probably don't know that are going to love and miss him, sad for his passing, that you may never know about. But he had a very big family, and we all loved him. Thank you.
And the blessings of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you now and always. And all God's people said, amen. This ends our service for today.
All right, I just wanted to, we'll only interrupt the drinking and eating for a few minutes here, but some people want to get on their way. Thanks to the Martins and to the Simons for everything they did to arrange a magnificent day in the service. A day we'll probably not forget. And I have, before I offer the final fond farewell toast, like Keith, I have just one story to tell. And that is that I was with Keith and Kay in probably 5 different countries and many parts of this country at political events, whatever events. We traveled to Rome and Germany and so on. And on one trip, turned out to be a very unique and somewhat historic day in their lives. Keith was covering the Republican National Convention in 1988 in New Orleans, and I was down there because my work is politics and government. And we never missed a convention or a party. And we were with my cousin Jordan Clark, a lobbyist in Washington, and he's arranging a dinner party for local people that are down in New Orleans. Joe Flannery from the Scranton Times, if anybody remembers him, and other people. So it's going to be a great night, and it's all agreed. Short notice, it's going to be a dinner party at Commander's Palace, one of the great restaurants. Jordan's the host, and about an hour later, I get a call in my room from Keith. He says, "Hey, that dinner tonight, yeah? Does your cousin mind if I bring a date?" I said, "No." He says, "Maybe you should ask him." I said, "That's fine, no. You bring who you wish." And he says, "Yeah, well, I got to tell you," he says, "I was at a regional caucus this morning," and he says, "the delegates of Minnesota were there." And he said, "I met this fantastic lady for breakfast, and she's a delegate, and we got along pretty good. I'd like to take her to dinner tonight." So dinner that night was his first date with his future wife, which I never ceased to remind him I had a hand in. And we went on from there. The times we were together over at the house in the back mountain every Sunday for dinner, just something I always want to remember. I had many encounters with Keith that were memorable, and the New Orleans one was certainly something. But then we got into extracurricular activities. He was the news director or newsman in Channel 28 in Wilkes-Barre. I was then running the Anthracite Industry Coal Association in Washington. We were working on a big project in Germany for them to bring more coal over to the Army bases. I decided we needed PR, pictures and everything, so I talked Keith into flying to Germany. And he says he'll do it. He doesn't have much time, but he'll do it on a weekend. That's a lot much time. The idea is he'll come over and supervise photographers and figure out strategies and so on, and we'll have a good time as we always do. So here's how he worked. He was so ready to go at all times. On a Saturday morning, he had to do the Friday night news, he couldn't leave. Saturday morning, he drives from Lancaster, where he's working then, to the airport at Philadelphia. He flies from Philadelphia to JFK. He gets on Pan Am, which is still in business. He flies nonstop all day to London. He gets in London 8 o'clock on Saturday night. He gets a connection to Frankfurt, and at quarter to midnight, he walks in the door of our hotel outside of Frankfurt, which happens to be a Castle Stromberg. And of course, we kept that bar after hours, which the Germans don't like too much. But the next day, to show how he adapted to things, that was one of the fascinating things about him. It was never a no. We have a big problem now at this point. We have to get movies of a federally leased coal yard where thousands of tons of anthracite coal are there ready to be used. And it's part of our story because the Congress put it there. So now the thing is, we want to take pictures. He doesn't want to trust the local photographers because it's a sensitive mission. we felt if we went to the coal yard in the daytime that they'd say, no, nothing, get out of here. So he decides on Sunday night, we're going to take pictures. So he decides he'll use his own camera. We get over somewhat near the coal yard. He starts to walk across a bridge. I said, where the hell are you going? That's the coal yard over there, that's what we need. Now, the Berlin Wall is still up. So you got to be sensitive taking pictures of a federal secure location. So he's not getting good angles on the bridge, so he starts to walk on a water line, which is at the precipice of the bridge, and he could easily fall in the Rhine River if he tried. So he's walking over a pipeline, and I'm screaming at him, stop. You know. He's getting the pictures. 2 police cars show up. German police cars, okay? It's of course against the law to take a picture of a federal facility. He had a speed ticket or something. It was so long. So finally, he convinced the people that because the coal is there, people in the United States have food on their table. They fell for it. And it's 9 o'clock dark on a Sunday night. I said, let's get to the bar. So that was key. Our friend Mr. Burns made some very important comments today. The defense background of working the military, which was what nothing made Keith Martin more proud. Nothing. I was with him at Ronald Reagan's funeral in Washington when the caisson came up Constitution Avenue, and watched him start crying. He was in another world. He just was so obsessed with this country and what was going on. I didn't forget that about him either, but I think over the course of times, we all have our own stories, and I could probably do a book if I tried, but I did want to, part of his defense accomplishments was that about 15 years ago, he was one of 8 Americans appointed to the Congressional Overseas Basing Commission to serve on the commission, travel the world to U.S. facilities, put a report together for the Congress about what bases need help or should be put aside or whatever. 27 countries he got to. He was enormously proud of it and wouldn't allow me to make a big PR time out of it. And, many people in his business of the military get to high ranks, but few get to commissions of that nature. That was something, because he was really with the world leaders of defense, the civilians, and his name is in the book, and I have them if you ever want one. So, having said all that, I have the very sad duty of everybody I hope has a Johnny Walker, because that was his favorite beverage. That's where he got his vitamins. And as was Kay, and I do have to say, I'm so glad what Harry and his family did today, and Kay's sons, Simons, who are here. God knows we had fun at the Cape, fun in South Carolina and everywhere with them. They did a great job in putting this together. I do have to personally say that, isn't it strange that after 2 intense years of working with Kay on her health situation, Kay passes, and only a short time later, Martin, who kept his health problems from Michael, the big one happens and is over. To the end, he was so loyal to her and to people in his family. So let's give a fond farewell to the man for all times, Keith Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Brothers, family, country.